Hello viewer, welcome for Business Studies Form 3. Give us your feedback or ask any question through our SMS number 22518, our Facebook page, Erimu TV, or also you can also use our Twitter handle, Erimu_KE. Today, we are going to look at method determining price of products. But before that, we are going to look at our last lesson. Remember, I left you with some assignment. And what you are supposed to do, you are supposed to distinguish between equilibrium quantity and equilibrium price. So you are supposed to say that equilibrium quantity is the quantity that sellers are willing to sell at a given price and the buyers are willing to buy at the same price. So it is that quantity that the sellers are willing to sell at a given price, and also the buyers must accept that price. So at the same price, buyers are willing to buy. Equilibrium price, on the other hand, is the price at which sellers are willing to sell a stated quantity of a commodity which consumers are also willing and able to buy. Remember, you're talking about equilibrium. Equilibrium point, we said, this is the point whereby the demand is equal to the supply. And it is at that point where you get the equilibrium quantity and you also get the equilibrium price. The other one, you're supposed to use diagram to illustrate equilibrium price and quantity. And that diagram illustrates the equilibrium point where we get the equilibrium price and as well as the equilibrium quantity. It is at that point where the demand curve cuts the supply curve, or that point where the demand curve and the supply curve cuts each other. So when suppliers offer a certain quantity of a commodity which the consumers are willing and able to buy at a given price, then the quantity supplied will be equal to the quantity demanded. The quantity supplied will be equal to the quantity demanded, and that is how we come up with what we call the equilibrium point. Now back to our lesson of the day, and by the end of this lesson, I would expect that you should be able to understand how market forces determine the price of a product. You should also, by the end of the lesson, you be able to state and you explain other methods other than the market forces of determining the price of a commodity or of a product. So we start by stating all the methods of determining the price of a product, one of which we have already discussed so far, which is the market forces, which is brought about by the demand and the supply. And then after that, we're also going to look at the government policy, how the government can determine the price of a product, the ways that the government uses to be able to do so. The other one is the haggling or the bargaining. Haggling or the bargaining. Bargaining is whereby the buyer and the seller negotiates towards the price of a product. This is where the seller states the price at which he or she would like the goods to cost. On the other hand, we have the buyer who negotiates with the seller until they arrive at a given amount, at a final amount. The other one is auctioning, which we call bidding. And the last one is the tendering or the procurement. Let's now look at each and every method we have just mentioned. We start with market forces. And market forces is where the equilibrium quantity and the equilibrium price are determined by the supply and the demand forces in the market. And I have said earlier on that this is the point where the demand and the supply curve cuts each other. You can see on the diagram, we have that point where the two curves are meeting. So from that point, from that meeting point, if you draw a line towards the y-axis, you get that is the equilibrium price. Towards the x-axis, you get that is the equilibrium quantity. So the demand and the supply curve, which we are referring to as the market forces, also determines the price of a product. So you find that the price that a product is sold at is the equilibrium price, and the quantity supplied, the goods supplied, the amount of goods supplied is at that equilibrium quantity. The other one, you have talked about the government policy. The government policy, and we have said that the government can also influence the price of a product, but using a number of ways, one of which is the price control. Price control, and this is whereby the government sets the price of a product. For instance, when you talk of the petroleum products, it is the Ministry of Energy that sets the price of petroleum products. It can also alter the price. The government can also alter the price of products or commodities using taxation. And you know that if the government increases the tax of a product, what happens is that the price of that product goes up. And then when it goes up, what are the repercussions? So when the price of a product goes up, you find that its demand goes down. From the law of demand, the demand of that product goes down. And when the price, the demand goes down, also the supply goes down. But now we want to limit ourselves to the price of a product. So taxation, increase in tax increases the price of a product. Reduction in tax reduces the price of a product. Number 3 is the subsidy. The government can also alter the price of commodities through the subsidy. And subsidy, this is an amount that is given to the producers or to the manufacturer by the government as a way of trying to cater for the part of the cost of production. And the effect of the subsidy is that it lowers the price of a product. The other one is the price regulation. But now let's look at each and every way. The 4 ways that we have just mentioned that the government can alter or affect, either increase or decrease the price of a product. So let's start with the price control. And price control is where the government fixes the price at which the commodity should be sold in the market. Is where the government fixes the price at which the commodity should be sold in the market. The other way that the government can affect the price of a product is taxation. And taxation is whereby the government taxes a commodity. So the government has that power of taxing a commodity more. And when a commodity is taxed, definitely its prices increases or it becomes more expensive. Its prices goes down, or determination of prices of this is by determining the highest or the lowest price. Government establishes regulations to determine of certain product. So we have talked about 4 ways through which the government can use to determine the price of a product. Now the other method is the haggling or the bargaining. And I told you earlier on that this one involves the dialogue. It's a dialogue between the buyer and the seller. So it involves persistent discussion of the price between the buyer and the seller until both parties, that is, the buyer and the seller, agree on a price to be charged. Let's say, for example, you go to buy maybe something like a raincoat, for instance, then the buyer, the seller will tell you that maybe it costs like 500. You don't just hand over that 500 to the seller. You negotiate, trying to make sure or to make Sarah to sell you the clothing at a lower price. So you negotiate, and finally you both agree on a price that you'll be charged. So that's what we call haggling or bargaining. The other method of determining the price of a product is auctioning, or what we call bidding. And this whereby buyers are given a chance to suggest a price at which they are willing to buy a product. This is something that we have seen, especially, for example, in churches, whereby during a market day, people bring products. You offer what you have, then that one is sold. So what happens is that the person selling the product just lifts it up, and the congregation suggests. So you just shout your price, or the price that at which you are willing to buy the product. Then finally, the one who bids the highest price is given is given that chance to buy the product. So we say that the highest bidder is allowed to buy the product. And the other method is tendering or procurement. And this is where buyers or suppliers are sought from the public through an advertisement to apply for tenders. Mostly, this one, maybe you've seen it on newspapers. And this is usually what happens for public companies, for example. So they advertise a tender. So the buyers or the suppliers are sought from the public through an advertisement. So the tender is advertised, and then people apply for it. That marks the end of our lesson. And I'm going to review with some assignment that we are going to review during our next lesson. So explain how the government can influence the price of a commodity. Explain how the government can influence the price of a commodity. We have discussed of 4 ways that the government can influence the price of a commodity. So state, then you explain clearly how the government can use the 4 ways that we have just discussed to influence the price of a commodity. We are going to look at this during our next lesson. But I'm not going to leave without us looking at our business quote of the day. And our business quote of the day says, "Great products sell themselves." So this one on a writer note means that if you are in business, for example, and you produce products that are of high quality, that are satisfying the needs of customers, and then the customers happen to realize that your products are good, or the products that you are producing are good, they'll just come on their own. You don't even have to go for them. They'll come competing for your products. Thank you for watching. See you during our next lesson.